Vicky makes an underrated horror movies video and tries not to mention the same 5 movies. Challenge level impossible. Hey there, creepy peeps. It is almost the end of pre-October #1, and we're about to head into pre-October #2. And I know that we all save the best of the best horror and Halloween movies for the month of October. So I thought I would make a list of horror movies that I think are underrated / under talked about for you to watch in like the lead up to your October watch list. These are not all necessarily autumnal horror movies, nor do they all take place during Halloween. These are just horror movies, like I said, I feel like are not talked about enough, at least in the parts of the horror community online that I am in. So consider this a good list to work through in September, maybe as a way to get you in the spirit for October. Obviously, this list is entirely subjective, and I know I'm speaking to an audience of fellow diehard horror fans. So you may have seen some of these movies, maybe all of these movies already, but movies can be new to anyone, so I'm hoping that at least one of these movies on this list is something that you haven't heard of or seen before, or maybe it's been sitting on your watch list on Letterboxd for a while, and maybe I can inspire you to finally take it off the watch list. As always, I've made a list on my Letterboxd account that corresponds with this video that might include a couple other movies that I didn't get to talk about here. So you can go to my Letterboxd and check that out. And please, if you leave a comment on this video with your like underrated horror movie picks with a little explanation as to like why you think somebody should watch it if they haven't already, I will add it to the Letterboxd list with credit. Let's go in alphabetical order. Why the fuck not? So that means we're starting with Cherry Falls. Cherry Falls is a meta slasher starring Brittany Murphy. We're following the students of the titular town of Cherry Falls who are being stalked by a mysterious killer that is targeting virgins. So naturally, the students plan a pop your cherry party to protect themselves. Despite the fact that that title alone and that description makes you want to make sure that the director or anybody responsible for coming up with this movie is on a list, the premise is a funny response to the slasher paradigm that always sees the virginal character being the one to survive at the end of the horror movie. That particular final girl trope or characteristic really speaks to like the like purity culture and like the family values of like the Reagan era 80s where the slasher was reigning supreme. And Cherry Falls creates a kind of like in-your-face response of, well, what if we stopped punishing characters for having sex? This movie is unintentionally funny in its attempt to be like a maybe a little too serious post-Scream era meta slasher, but it does make for a really fun group watch, I think. Next is an oldie. Dead of Night is a horror anthology about a group of people who gather at a farm. Walter Craig has gone there to seek a potential client, and he realizes he's dreamt about each of the guests at the farm. This starts a conversation amongst the group, and they take turns telling each other about a strange, unexplainable event that they've experienced. Even though this is a much older movie, I still don't want to spoil the twist at the end for anyone that hasn't seen it. But if there's one thing that this girl loves, it's a spooky anthology. Something about a collection of like short spooky stories just gets me in the mood for Halloween. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I grew up on like scary stories to tell in the dark or something. I don't know, but it feeds my Halloween soul for some reason. And each story in this movie gets progressively weirder, and the ending reveal was actually quite fun. Without spoiling it, it was like one of those endings where it's like you're just like so into the stories that you're not really thinking, but like when the twist hits, you're kind of like, why didn't I think of that? But you're not mad at it. This movie is best remembered for the concluding story that features a malevolent ventriloquist dummy that terrorizes his owner. Actually pretty disturbing, that short, and if you have seen the movie Magic, it very much gives those vibes, just a much earlier version of that. Okay, next on my list is Deathgasm, which is a New Zealand horror comedy about a death metal band that accidentally summons an ancient evil that throws their entire town into chaos. I am mentioning this one because yes, I do feel like this movie is not talked about enough, but there's also a sequel coming out soon. Deathgasm 2 is supposed to be part of the lineup at Fantastic Fest, and I'm going this year. So I'm really, really hoping I get to see it while I'm there in September. But Deathgasm itself is such a wild, funny ride, and I love rewatching it. It always makes me laugh. I especially like the blend of like the like drier humor with like more slapstick comedy. I think the balance works really well. And I saw a Letterboxd review once that called this the super bad of demonic possession movies. And honestly, that's like the perfect description for this movie. Naturally, since it's on this list, I feel like you should watch this movie no matter what, but it might be worth prioritizing a rewatch soon with a sequel coming out. I realize I have lots of movies on this list that start with the letter D. Next is The Devil's Candy, which follows an artist who moves his family into an old farmhouse. Once there, he starts hearing the voice of a demon, the voice the previous tenant hears that inspired him to kill his family. The previous tenant becomes convinced that this demon wants the young girl who's moved in, and he tries to kill her. I think this is the most disturbing movie that I'll include on this list. So if you decide to give this one a watch, just make sure you're in the mood for it. I feel like it's actually quite funny to talk about Deathgasm and The Devil's Candy like one after the other like this, because both incorporate metal in the movie in just vastly different ways. I do really like this movie and the way it blends a like possession slash like haunted house story with like psychological horror. It's definitely one that left me thinking about it long after the credits were rolling. So I'm going to talk about Grave Encounters and Grave Encounters 2 together because it just makes sense. Both are found footage horror movies surrounding an abandoned psychiatric hospital that is known to be one of the most haunted places in the world. In the first film, a TV crew for a ghost hunting show locks themselves in the hospital to film an episode and find that they are unable to leave as the hospital's walls and hallways keep changing. In the sequel, a film student decides to make a documentary about the original Grave Encounters film, which is canon in the sequel. He and his friends go to the hospital and find themselves similarly trapped in the building's halls. Both movies are relatively simple in premise. And the end of the second one, I will admit, gets a little like wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. But the way the hospital like halls and windows and doors constantly change reminds me of Rose Red a lot, and I really like that. It's just a really creepy concept to me. Does the movie feature some pretty cheap CGI demon face moments? Yeah, but it's kind of endearing in this duology. I don't know. For some reason, I really don't mind it. Like low key, these movies are comfort watches for me. I put them on in the background like all the time. And they're really cheesy. I think that's what makes them fun and makes them a great group watch as well. And the sequel stars everybody's favorite tatted and pierced emo boy from Final Destination Bloodlines, Richard Harmon. But the real ones know him from Grave Encounters 2. And the real ones know him from Trick or Treat. Then we're gonna jump down the alphabet a little bit to Last Shift, which follows a rookie police officer who has been assigned to the last shift of a closing police station. Over the course of the night, Jessica learns about the station's dark past, which is connected to an infamous criminal who once stayed there. Sure, there are some cliche and predictable moments, but I love the way the movie slowly builds up the tension by letting the like inherent creepiness of being in a big building alone overnight just get under your skin. That alone is enough to like get my mind primed for anything else that they're gonna throw at me. So by the time it gets to the point where we're like really diving into like this kind of like cult leader and his followers and how that connects to the building and stuff, I'm already scared out of my mind. I watched this movie for the first time in like the best setting, you know what, at night, all the lights off, phone away. And I have to say, scare the crap out of me. Like, I just feel like under the right circumstances, this is a really effective and scary movie. Don't confuse this one with the like inexplicable like remake that the same director made called Malum. It has like really bad reviews online. I've never watched it because it just was received so poorly. So I'm like, not gonna bother. One Cut of the Dead follows an indie film crew that sets out to make a zombie film in one take when the cast and crew are attacked by real zombies. And that's just plot A. I feel like One Cut of the Dead had its very quick like moment in the sun when Shudder picked it up. And then I feel like everybody forgot about it. It is such a fun and like really endearing tale about the joy and sometimes chaos of making something with a group of people. I love the way the movie plays out, first with the zombie movie as we are promised by the summary. Then we flash back to how everyone got involved in the project in the first place. Armed with that knowledge, we see the movie again, but from behind the scenes. It is such a great layout for a movie, and there ends up being this through line with the director and his wife and his daughter who end up being involved in the project and helping him. Like it's just about the way movies bring us together, and like creating something like that brings people together. It's just a silly, like super low budget zombie movie with so much heart and blood and guts. I still don't know why people don't talk about this movie more. All right, now I know I've talked about Southbound before on other like underrated horror movie videos. Southbound is a horror anthology that takes place on a desolate stretch of desert highway. We move through each story as if driving on the highway, each story moving us into the next, like stops on the road. I love the way each story connects to the other one in this, like literally the end of each like leads into the beginning of the next story, especially how like the first and last segments bring it all back, and both are directed by Radio Silence. So even though they're at opposite ends of the movie, they feel like one segment, and it's really put together in a cool way. Each story in between though is brutal and gory, but with like a twist of the supernatural. They're all kind of weird in a way that matches the desert setting, where like, I don't know about y'all, but like I think of hallucinatory visions from like the heat and the monotonous setting. Like that's the kind of vibe I get from the desert, and that's the kind of vibe these stories bring. I always highly recommend this anthology. If I had to only recommend like one movie above all others in this video, it'd be One Cut of the Dead, but it would be immediately followed by Southbound. Lastly on my list, I have Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which follows two hillbillies who are suspected of being serial killers by a group of college kids on a camping trip. A series of misunderstandings lead Tucker and Dale to believe the college kids are in a suicide cult. I'll be honest, Tucker and Dale probably like toes the line the most out of this list, but I still feel like we don't talk about this enough. I feel like comedy is an interesting genre, at least for me. Like depending on the type of comedy, I feel like it all kind of like wears thin with repeated watches, and I don't know if anybody else experiences this. So only a small handful of films have stood the test of time for me and remained so funny that I laugh like I'm seeing it for the first time every time. And this is one of those movies. I think a lot of you horror fans out there would probably agree in placing Tucker and Dale in the meta slasher category. And I think as a meta slasher, this movie is really unique and original the way it approaches horror movie stereotypes. The comedy that comes from like these idiot college kids thinking that Tucker and Dale are murderers, and they unwittingly end up putting themselves in dangerous situations by pure accident, is genius. The miscommunication trope that happens in this movie is the only miscommunication trope I will allow, because it's just so good. That is my list. Like I said at the beginning of the video, please share your underrated horror picks in the comments, and if you share your movie pick with a little like one sentence reason why it's underrated or why people should watch it, I will add it to my Letterboxd list. It could be a nice growing community list on Letterboxd, and I think that's really fun. If you enjoyed this video, if you did, I don't know. I'm glad you did. I don't need you to do anything else. I'm just glad you enjoyed it. I'll see you at the end of this week with a Letterboxd wrap up for the month of August. It's a little light this month, but I think that's fine because it's going to be stacked when we do a wrap-up video in September after I go to Fantastic Fest. So I'll see you at the end of the week for that, and then next week with more videos. Until then, stay strange. Bye.